call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Supervisor Moore?
Here.
Councilwoman McNamara? Here. Councilman Isili?
Here.
Councilman Powell?
Here.
All right, we're going to start today. Our only topic today is the proposed battery energy storage system code amendments. And Janice Shear and Seth Race are here with us, as is our Deputy Town Attorney Christine Sclera.
Morning.
Morning. So at our last work session, you gave us an outline, and now you've distributed more fleshed out actual proposed code.
That's correct.
You said we're going to completely repeal and then replace the existing code. And
That's
that
right.
seems like the cleanest way to do it.
Yes, there were some glaring holes in the previous code that we hope we have filled. This has been a process that we undertook with the steering committee, as you're fully aware. We distributed some interim findings that the steering committee, that is, some requests for code updates, which we have put into this new revised code, as well as folding in some of the recommendations from the interagency working group formed by Governor Hochul. They too had recommendations for future best facilities. So those are encapsulated in this new draft code.
And we reviewed a lot of these, right? The last work session that we had, I think we've sort of reviewed some of them, and it looks like you've expanded on this and provided some examples.
Yes, that's correct. We certainly have worked very diligently on the verbiage for each one of these provisions. That's what we present to you today.
Did you change anything since you emailed these?
No, I
Not
have
yet.
not. No,
Okay.
you have the latest edition.
Right.
If I might have changed the formatting issue, that would be about the extent of it. That would be it.
And we'll further refine this as we go along, just to ensure that there's consistency, like paragraph to paragraph and going back and forth. So while you may see some, when we do this for, the final form on Thursday, it's substantively in its form, nothing's changing in terms of the substance. We might just make little edits to make it more consistent here and there, formatting, et cetera. That's all.
Next Thursday, we're planning to schedule a public hearing.
Yes.
Further. Okay. All right, well, how would you like to take us through this?
Just quickly, just to remind you, good morning, that we added a new article, Article 7A, which is like the overarching, and then the repeal and replacement is the special exception standards for those applications that go to the planning board. So, and then there's Chapter 123, which is a chapter that sort of when you're in plan review at the building department, that's kind of what they're looking at, and that cross-references a great deal of different code provisions, and also provides for a peer review, even at the plan review level.
Forgive me, Janice. So this is new.
New, Article 7 is new.
This is the repeal and replace.
Repeal and replace. And then edited, existing 123 with new provisions.
Got it.
Adding the ability for a plan review, like a building inspector or plan reviewer in the building department, to send this out to an expert against all those codes. So we don't have to worry about, having that in-house. It's going to go, and that provides for that.
Excellent.
So, and Seth's going to go through each section fairly quickly, but, if you have any questions, we'll jot them down and make sure we can answer them all for you.
I got 2 copies. Or it's separate.
Oh, that must, does one say special exception and one says Article 7?
No, those
They're
are
both the same. Okay, thank you.
Did you get the 7A one?
Did I give you 2 of something? In that?
There it is.
Yeah.
7A,
So it
yeah.
goes 7A, Article 17,
162,
yeah, 331, 62, 21, and then Chapter 120. So it's 3 pieces of legislation that will all go in the code.
Kind of bury me in paper.
And 123 is its own thing, it still exists and we're not really changing it.
It still
We're
exists,
just,
it wasn't.
it's just, yeah, where,
Under
it's
80.
already exists, there was no moratorium on this, this is under 80, but what we did was add all of the various certifications and fire codes.
Okay. I see that, okay.
And we also pointed towards the tiering system, so not only from the energy storage, Article 7A, can you look to see where your energy storage, what tier it falls into, but you can also, from the bottom up, see where your energy storage, it points you in the direction of where you need it, what codes apply to you. So shall we start with the overarching code, the energy storage, Article 7A? We had previously looked over that. You have the kind of table of contents there in front of you. So this is going to, again, delineate the different tiering systems. So we have 0 to 80. That does not have a tier number. Then you have 80 to 600. That would be, and when I say 600, I'm talking in kilowatt hours. So that would be a tier 1. Then you have from 600 to 5 megawatts. That would be a tier 2, and from 5 megawatts to 19 megawatts, that's a tier 3. Each of those tierings is subject to a different set of requirements, development standards that we try to encapsulate here in this article. So as you can see, in applicability, I just skip down to applicability and go past the purpose, the legislative findings, and the definitions, if I may.
Mhm.
Okay, so section A would be the residential installations. Again, you have in front of you 123.39. This has location standards for where you would put a battery energy storage,
Wait,
indoors
what?
or outdoors.
I thought you were
So
saying.
you're on page 6 now, of
Oh,
Article 7.
there was
Talking
one
about
just
behind the
comment I had on
7, not 7A.
page 2.
Article 7, page 6.
All right, but I just wanted to say something about page 2.
Oh,
Like on
have I
the,
skipped by something?
in,
Okay.
you have it, it's clear on the first page that it's over 600 kilowatts, but less than 5, you know. But then on the second page in paragraph D, it's, it looks like it's 5, maximum of 5, and then in E, it's 5, you know. So
Wait, so
I
now,
think later you
hold
made
on.
those changes to make sure there wasn't any overlap in the category
Overlap.
definition. But you know what I mean, up to 5
Absolutely.
and then over 5.
Yes. I will
But-
make sure to check that once again for the overlap and inclusive of or above, to a maximum of,
You're
But
just
you
saying
did
like
it everywhere
greater
else.
than,
Yeah.
greater than.
5, up to a maximum of 5.
So we're in 7A, right? I just want to confirm.
Maybe
Yeah.
you should say up to
So that's
5 to a
still
maximum
page
of
6 is
19.
the applicability, and that's still what you're talking about. So we'll make sure all that language matches.
Well, on page 6, it's all good. It's just on
Okay.
page 2 with
I
there.
see.
You want it to
Oversight.
match what it
Up to
says.
5
Okay.
to a maximum of 19.
No,
Then
it's not up to 5 to a maximum of 19, it's greater than 5 to a maximum of 19.
Okay.
Okay.
I will make that correction. Thank you for pointing
Just,
that out.
just as an overarching thing, just so for everyone to understand, we're talking about small batteries in your house, building departments reviewing those things, that's fine. There's a, section of commercial accessory uses, like you're a supermarket, you wanna put a battery on your site, something along those lines is different. And then if you're just coming as a special exception for a battery storage use, you can, to the planning board, you can only do 5, up to 5, no more than 5, as a special exception to the planning board. Then if you're looking to do more than 5, and by the way, the special exception to the planning board is only available in light industrial zones. So
Yeah.
there's that, that's a big, and then if you wanted to do, say, a larger, storage facility, we cap that at 19 and it comes to you first.
Mhm.
So we'll go through all that, but just
Okay.
for
Yeah.
clarity.
That's good to know. And just one, on the top, very definition of the top of page 6,
Mm.
a power purchase to be a capital A, the definition.
Ah.
See where it starts.
Yes, quite.
All right, go.
Thank you.
That's all I have to
That's,
say.
glad you're catching these things. Sometimes I miss
Of course, I mean, this is a
what
huge
this is for.
effort.
Okay.
Right.
So yes, under applicability A, you've got the 0 to 80 kilowatt hours, building permits and electrical permits allowed in all zones. Again, just to reiterate, that's behind the meter, residential grade. Then we're gonna scale up to the commercial, style units, call them tier 1. They will be pursuant to the planning board, 330-183, special exception general standards. That's an important point. And 330-122. This would be in non-residential areas, tier 1.
And tier 2.
And
Tier
we're
one
going,
means like you could be in shopping center business
Right.
with your supermarket
Commercial.
and get a
Right.
commercial battery to go along with it, up
Yeah.
to 600 kilowatts.
Kilowatts.
That's it. Then you're getting into above 600 to a maximum of 5. That gets pushed into industrial zones only.
Okay.
Yeah.
So B and C non-residential.
Right. Although C is industrial, B is non-residential. Like, and it's only up to 600 kilowatts, meaning,
Okay.
and it's accessory to some kind of use, a business
Supermarket
use.
or-
Yeah.
Understood.
and just to be clear, the 600 is part of the fire code and NFPA. This was not something we chose. This comes straight out of the standards and the codes.
Cool.
And when you move above a megawatt, because you're really looking at storage of energy, the codes have dropped the hour because it's not so much. It's highly variable as to the chemical composition of the battery. It's basically you start looking at how big is that fuel tank when you get into those sizes. Not can I run my house or this equipment with that amount of energy, that power.
Mhm.
So that's the kilowatt hour aspect.
Got
So it's just to clarify that, if that clarified.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're saying the tier 1 set forth in B are non-residential and only go before the planning board,
Correct.
and it's a special exception standard nonetheless?
So there's two kinds of, there's special exceptions. So in the code you see SE. Some special exceptions are just 330-122, which is, just compatibility. Like there's an extra layer of review there to make sure that that should even be there. So that's just the general standards. Then some uses have, everybody always has to go through the general standards, but some uses have very specific standards too. So we're saying, at least you have the general standard review, which is all about locating this which is not a large equipment shelter. It's only up to 600 kilowatt hours, so it might be one cabinet of a battery to go with the supermarket, and the planning board is looking at it saying, is this appropriate? Is this going to bother anybody? Are we sure we want this here? And then amend the site plan to locate it. That's one thing. If you're saying up to 5 megawatt in an industrial zone, that's a different story for the planning board. Now there's
That's bigger.
16221 with the million standards of safe. This is still safety because we still have 123, which all the fire codes are in and everything else. But this gets into even more rigorous review when you go from 600 to 5.
I
Okay.
see, so there's a
So this is a
general
special
and a
standard.
specific.
So versus this one's just general standards and a site plan. The 600 to 5 is general standards and the specific special exception parameters.
But still only the planning board.
Still the planning board up to 5. As far as we
Inclusive of
understood
that.
it, that's what you
Yeah.
wanted to do. And then above 5 to a maximum of 19, because then we're not getting involved in the state taking over the review at 20. If you stay below 20, you're good. So we picked 19 because at 20, the state comes in and says we can decide that this, the Renewable Energy Siting Office, ORES,
Mhm.
they come in and take over the review. So keeping it under that threshold keeps it in your hands.
Right.
And so then you would review it first as an overlay district and then go through the standards yourselves or however we're going to work that out and then goes through a site plan review.
So yeah, that's C, tier 3. I'm sorry, that's D, tier 3, in the applicability. And then we did point out that tiers 2 and 3 will both be will be considered type 1 actions under SECRA and require a full.
So we
environmental
can't,
review.
no one can go forward with a tier 3 unless the board agrees to put a renewable energy overlay district in place.
That's right.
That's correct.
And that could be put anywhere.
No.
Once it
There
fits
are
the-
exemptions.
Those could be in
Yeah,
LI 40, but but also in like the sand mines or the
because people want
other opportunity
Yeah, they
areas
want
that you want them
That's
to go
put,
in.
set forth later, right?
Yes, that
Yes.
is
Yeah, 'cause
later.
people want
Oh,
to
yeah.
know that,
Okay.
so they don't get
But
scared.
still not residential.
Yeah, that's good.
We should probably put light. It
Uh,
says
we
light
do-
industrial.
We certainly wanted to put in some exemptions. That would be equipment that already has batteries that are they were designed to have certain batteries within them, and those batteries had to be switched out.
Well, hang on, so B, you make a point of saying non-residential, but in C and D, I don't think we do,
It gets
so
in
maybe
there.
we should.
It gets into the standards later.
Oh.
You can see them and then tell us if you want it over there too, but
Okay.
it is there. It gets into avoidance and where it could be.
What's the planning board's role with D, when it's with the town board? Is there a requirement, we
There's
put the
later,
overlay.
it spells all that out, but,
Oh.
but it's the same way as a zone change.
Okay.
So the way it works is that they get referred as an agency, and then, you're coordinating secret with them, and then, you make a decision, and then it's a two-step process, just like a zone change, and then they go get their site plan and all that approved.
We don't have to reference all that in here.
It is in there at the end.
Oh, okay. All right, proceed.
Okay, I will skip, there are exemptions, of course. There are situations where you need temporary emergency power. We put some provisions in there for that, and also modifications. We tried to cover any possibility. There might be more, but that's general language that is often used. Then we move on to the compatibility with relevant codes. Certainly, we're going to cover the Uniform Code and federal law and national standards as they may be amended. So this is something the steering committee dealt with at length, that there are new codes and standards being put out all the time, and they are especially in the BESS area, which is under considerable development, those standards. So we are trying to adopt the latest editions of all the standards.
Does that incorporate the governor's working group recommendations? Are those gonna end up in this?
They will eventually. We have adopted them. I have adopted them. I have put them in code form for us. So we are going to adopt them in our code. But it should become part of the fire code at some point down the line. It's still in recommendation phase. So, but we took those 16 recommendations and we folded them into our code. So that's.
What if they change after we adopt the code?
It incorporates any amendments that are duly authorized herein. They're incorporated by reference.
Okay.
One of the big recommendations from that working group was the mandatory peer reviews. So this has become a large part of our code, and it's found throughout all three sections. Peer review, it shall be required for anything, any tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So what we're trying to get is the technical expertise, the knowledge that can that decipher all the information on an energy storage facility, assist us, be it the town board or the planning board, or all the way down to the inspection for commissioning or decommissioning. There should be a technical expert there. The Department of State through NYSERDA is putting together a list of qualified, certified individuals that is going to be able to assist the town. This is in its infancy. I don't have all the details, but I do know that we are going to require peer review at all tier levels. So, and that is B points out that will be paid for. The town will collect the fee collected in escrow for this plan review. This will be paid by the applicant.
So the applicant doesn't do the peer review for their own
No.
thing. They give us money, we put it in an account, we engage the review.
Right.
So they're working for us. So we do this normally with any other review that you have on your matters or the planning board.
So then moving on to the development standards, the general requirements, we have the basic information to be presented. followed by, there is a bit of a situation with site control. So we've done an owner's endorsement and something that demonstrates that the developer has some lease or is going to be obtaining title. Somehow we have to make it obvious that the developer has some interest in the site. However, he might not have actually paid for it yet because the energy storage plan might not work. So we tried to bridge that connection between the developer and the actual parcel. Moving on to B, this would be business and industrial districts. We have set a capacity for the 600 kilowatt to 5 kilowatt as an accessory.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They would be allowed to scale the energy storage unit to 24 times the energy use, the daily energy usage. This is something that I found in the FDNY code. I found to be useful as that is their standard.
This says 80 to 5. Did you mean
Did I say-
600?
This doesn't mean you're not, it means tier 1 and tier 2, but it's a standard for looking at when they say whether or not they're accessory or primary. This has to do with primary or accessory uses and how to tell if they're generating so much power beyond, if they're just getting and storing power from the grid, you can do that up to 5 megawatts. But if you're like, no, I'm storing power for this, we have a metric to say it's 24 times your annual daily energy use. Then it's, and these are all calculated by PSEG and all that. They have those. So we can then, a building, again, we're always trying to, you have to have some kind of metric to gauge somebody against. And be like, nope, you're 30 times the maximum daily, blah, blah, blah. You're not accessory anymore. You're primary. And now you have to go with primary setbacks. It has to do with where it's located and how we gauge what you're doing. Because people could say they're primary or accessory. So it's really a standard for B and C are looking at whether or not it's primary or accessory.
Should we include the 80 kilowatt
That was
behind the
enough.
meter? Or only start
First, I
at 600?
misspoke and said 600. It is 80, excuse me.
It is
Tier
80.
1, yes.
In
The
other
tier
words,
one's
if someone
not-
says, I'm putting
80 is
this
not tier one.
battery as
80 to
accessory,
600.
80 to 600. I didn't think that was in the tier 1.
that is tier 1.
I thought tier 1 was 80 to 600. That's what I mean.
But
Oh,
this
up
is
to
not
80, I'm
about
sorry.
a
Go ahead.
tiering standard.
Mhm.
This is about, regardless of if you're tier 1 or tier 2, we want to know how you're operating this thing.
Like, how
Is
much you're
this your
gonna use.
primary use on the site, or is this accessory to something?
Yeah.
And if it's accessory to something, this is the metric we use to confirm that.
Okay.
And if it's not, then it's a primary use. And we then in C say, okay, we have standards about the number of uses that you can have on a parcel.
Mm.
Like you can have 2 and, it depends on the size of the parcel. So then those standards kick in if it's a primary use. Then we go, oh, well, then you're only allowed 2 primary uses, so you can't have that as a primary use. You have to scale it down so it's accessory. You know what I mean? Like this helps us in our review.
Mhm.
It's hard to explain
I know
it.
it's kind of hard to project, but what do you think on the average, are they gonna be primary use batteries or assistant batteries?
I think it depends, but we want to have that flexibility. Like
Yeah.
if somebody could, or in a business setting, want more than 80 but less than 600. We just want to make sure they're not getting in the battery storage game, and that's a primary use now more so than your other
Because they could
use.
sell.
We're just
yeah,
trying
they
to
could sell
gauge
what they don't.
what's the
oh,
primary use here. Because
that's-
you can't have it, if you do have it that way, then other standards kick in. And that's what we're referencing about 330, 31. Then we get into
yeah,
all that.
You could make a note to like why you're doing it, so they can't resell it.
It's not that they can't resell it, it's that we want to know to the extent
That-
which you can't be like, I'm only doing this, and it's really not that. Now we have a standard to tell. Is it really accessory, or are you beyond that standard? Now you're not accessory, it's another primary
Well,
use.
like solar is accessory, but at that point, points what you generate with your solar goes back into the grid, so it's,
Right, we can't like get in the middle of like if someone's, doing that, because how would we know?
I mean,
If
they
they're
could
storing
be,
the energy from the
this could
grid, we
end
don't.
up being, down the line, it just could be something that like they do with you to, offset energy usage, and they have a deal with you, like basically you do that just to offset your own, like you do with solar, just to offset your own electric bill, not to generate income.
Exactly.
Yes.
It just has to do with primary accessory
Yeah.
uses, and it's hard to explain.
But we have established a
But
line
now we have established a threshold so
Right.
that we can know whether or not how they're operating. If a business is a business and they want to have an accessory battery, that's fine. If a business is a business and they have room to have a second business, i.e. batteries, and not in residential, we're talking commercial, and not above 600 kilowatt, that's fine too. But you have now other standards kick in, like you may need more land area or something.
Mm-hmm.
You only get so many uses per property.
And that really brings us into the next level up, which would be battery storage is an accessory to a distributed generator, like a solar or a tidal or a hydro, wind, a renewable energy generator. So it can be considered an accessory to that, but to a certain point. We would like to match the energy that's produced by that distributed renewable generation facility to 1-to-1 to the energy storage.
To the size of the batteries. So this is a way of us keeping track of that.
And clearly, if it generates 4,000 kilowatt hours in a day, then it would be allowed to have a 4,000 kilowatt hour or 4 megawatt battery system.
Okay, that makes sense.
Moving on, avoidance areas. I think one thing, these are some of the standard areas to avoid. I'd like to point out that we did add the 500 feet of a designated coastal evacuation route. We thought that was very important considering the steering committee deliberations. And another very important point is 10 parcels within 300 feet of an occupied community building, a defined term, or single-family residence, as measured from property line to property line.
Where's that one? The community building? Oh, there it is. 10. Thank you.
But wait, let me just.
That's page 9, D10.
And then occupied community building is covered in the definitions.
And that's any building in occupancy group A, B, E, I, and R. Schools, colleges, daycare facilities, hospitals, correctional facilities, public libraries, theater, stadium. And this is really what a lot of the community was really, inquiring about, making sure that we are able to solidify that. So that's really nice that that's there.
Why are we calling it an occupied community building instead of just a community building?
Because that's a state term that we can just take. It's already been defined, vetted. Instead of making up our own definition, we just took one that already exists, and it's already codified in the state building code.
Okay.
Moving on to insurance and indemnification, I don't think that takes too much discussion. But moving on to 338.7 is the establishment of a renewable energy overlay district. Janice, would you?
Sure.
This
is your zone change section, really. I mean, it could be a separate article, but we thought because it's referencing things in the same article, just keep it as a different section. And the minimum site size then is 5 acres. In any case, the site shall be of such shape, dimension, topography, and location as will allow for proper setback screening and harmonious relationship with the adjoining land use. So that's something this board or future legislative boards will look at. I did notice opportunity sites where it's appropriate to do renewable energy overlay. We should have wrote light industrial zones, because if someone wanted to aggregate parcels in the light industrial and do over 5 but less than 19, they could do that, but they need an energy overlay zoning first. So I'm going to add that. So there'll be 5 different opportunity locations, and that's then light industrial zones, pre-existing sand mines, publicly owned properties, designated brownfields, and existing community distributed generation sites.
Janice, why did you originally say outside of light industrial zones to list them? Opportunity states outside. This
Yeah,
isn't
in letter
provision
B,
B.
I have that question.
I don't know.
Wouldn't that
We
include
have
them?
like 15 iterations of this. We were trying
that
to
would,
say
that would include them then. If it's
Yeah.
outside of those areas, they would be included.
Not necessarily.
I just think it should just say opportunity sites.
That's why I'm
As
saying.
long as
Yeah.
it's 5 acres, you can consider.
Because
like
I just
a
took
renewable-
opportunity sites outside of light industrial zones, meaning that light industrial zones are.
Are included.
I thought so
That's
too,
how I
but I
thought
don't
it.
see it when you were talking earlier when the supervisor was saying something. I was like, I don't see where it says that. So I just want to make it clear.
We'll make that clear for
Yeah.
sure.
Just that the traffic, having direct access and frontage, submission, that they have to come and get the elect to consider first, and they have some extra work to do before they come here, which is some community engagement and meeting with members of local civic and or CACs or other active community groups.
Very good.
What are these, and are any of these in B1 through 4, could any of them be in residential areas, like the publicly owned properties or the designated
Those things
brown
are in-
fields?
Yes, those are potentially in residential areas, and you would read, like a sand mine, it is a residential zone, so you'd have to rezone it depending on its circumstances if you want to.
But
Like
that would
it
be.
can't cover, otherwise it's impossible for us to.
But that would be reviewed by the planning board,
No,
right?
you.
No, you.
Oh.
Change of zone come to the town.
So,
Well, right.
But so the question I had was then, even something under 5 megawatts, even though it ultimately goes to the planning board, it starts with the town board, and we basically
Over
can
five.
kill it.
Over 5.
Over.
Oh, just over 5.
Unless
Planning
they
board
wanna
has
put it
purview
in a
up to
brown
5.
field or.
If they want to put it in any of these places,
Then it
they have to
comes
come
to
to
the
you.
town.
But as the supervisor noted, if it is in a residential area, doesn't that contradict the code?
No,
itself?
because this is a zone change provision that would allow you to say, well, this is a pre-existing sand mine, but it's, 3,000 feet away from any residential, and it's, I'm just making this up. It's so far away from any residential that we could land an energy overlay district here. You'd have to look at the circumstances of who's even asking,
And- And go a little bit further on that. So say if it's like 25 acres or 30 acres, he could subdivide it and have 3 of them in there. Because it's only, you're calling for 5 acres.
5 acres each, and they
Yeah.
have to be, sanctioned by this board first. So it is a zoning change.
So
And
that
we
the
talked
person could
about
actually have
separation
5.
of places.
And because all of the
4
pre-existing
units.
sand mines,
We
all
talked
of these certain places are wrongly zoned residential, because they existed before the resident, they were there before anybody else. So they have pre-existing nature to them. And whether or not you wanna put a zoning change on that, because they're nowhere near anyone anyway, or they feel like industrial anyhow, even though they're zoned from the past or something, you'll look at all that and decide, and you say, nah, I don't wanna do this, or I don't wanna consider this, or yes, this makes sense. It's all on, it's up to this board.
Does it make sense for a request for the zone change to go before the town board, or
It has to.
It has to.
it can't go before the zoning board?
No. It used to be that way.
Zoning board is
The
just a
code was
variance
changed.
board meant for relief from your zoning laws.
Well, but and that's what essentially they would potentially be seeking, right?
Well, we were under the impression from the steering committee, and the conversations was that you wanted that legislative oversight, that discretionary action. The zoning board has 5 criteria, and if you meet those criteria, you get that variance. Like, there's not the same kind of discretion that
We
you
couldn't-
have, which is like, we don't want this at all.
And I understand, how the procedure for zone changes comes before us, the board, and we make those decisions and we have the discussions. But, with respect to battery storage, I think, within the community, it's been brought up several times that, they want a much more arduous process that really looks at the specifics of a lot of these technicalities, the technology, the implications to the community. And I just feel this particular provision essentially provides a space for essentially the same situation that we've sort of been finding ourselves in now.
No, because those things were not pre-existing sand mines or pre-existing things, they're vacant parcels.
But we're creating an opportunity here for a developer to come in and say, hey, town board, we want to have battery storage here, and yes, near a residential area. but you're making the call.
But we have more leeway to make that call and more
But we have
ability
that.
to not let it go there than the ZBA does.
But
We can be more restrictive than the ZBA
You're
can
not
be.
landing any of these things, right? So you're just hearing these as a floating zone that you may or may not land depending on who's asking for it.
Mhm.
So.
And the parameters with which they're asking for it.
Well, the idea was we were going to repeal and replace this special exception to a certain standard, and we put the threshold of 5. But that's very small in the world of battery energy storage. And so if you want to be somewhere above 5, but you also don't want to kick into state oversight, there's this gap of 5 to, let's say, 20 or 19.
Which
What
is 2 or
happens
3.
there?
That triggers the overlay.
That's the
But it's not yet
you know,
created. It
the
triggers the
overlay
eligibility for
for
an
the
overlay,
overlay.
but doesn't have to happen.
there is a provision that says you could then, because the idea was we looked at all these sand mines, we looked at all these opportunity areas that either you're going to rezone them now or you rezone them if someone actually wants to do it. You would want to just rezone it maybe or not. But somebody has to come to you and ask instead
I
of
get
you
that, yeah.
just deciding to rezone them. That doesn't make sense either, because then we have to go through all this in a hypothetical way, and we don't really have a real application for us. It's better for you to be asked by somebody serious who wants to do it, and then you decide, versus us blanket rezone something to renewable energy because we think they may want to do that later. We don't know that any sand mine wants to do any of this. So it's better to leave it as an option, but not necessarily impose it on anyone.
Like we did with solar.
Yeah, it's out there, but it's not necessarily something that has to be, but it's available, and then you get to decide in the beginning and elect to consider whether you even want to entertain it. Say nah, and we don't, or this makes sense because this will actually serve a need, and you're not going to hurt anyone. It's not going to be near anything, and we're also only talking about up to 19 megawatt. This isn't a 100 megawatt facility either.
Right.
That's off the table entirely.
What's an example of an existing community distributed generation site?
Well, if you create those in the future,
Solar at the transfer station would be a CDG.
yeah.
Well, I'm more concerned about publicly owned properties.
Yeah.
For your
That's
You,
consideration.
this list
I
can
understand that,
change.
no, I
We just
Well, could we look at that list and maybe find
you can
ways
tell
to
me
add a
however
little bit
you
more?
want it to do, however you want to.
Is that municipally owned?
It could be municipally owned, yeah.
Because publicly owned would be like a Pico plant, right, on David White's Lane.
That's not public.
Well, that's National Grid, but it could get transferred to PSEG. If it did,
they
right,
wouldn't even
would
be
that be
subject
it?
to this.
I think it was meant to
That
say
is,
municipally owned though, because we do reference it somewhere else.
I'm sorry, it's wrong. It should say municipally owned, but just to be clear, National Grid, who owns the Pico plant, that's considered private.
It's a
They're
private
not
I
owned
know,
by a
but they
public
said that if they
entity.
got rid of it, then they have an agreement with PSEG, of right of first refusal, so then it could be public.
If that happens, PSEG is not public.
Well,
They are
we go to
exempt
Light.
from
I'm just saying,
utility.
we go to
Utilities
Light.
are exempt,
We go to Light.
Like,
Light.
that's what I meant.
but LIPA is exempt from all of this. LIPA doesn't come to you and ask you to do anything.
Yeah, they can put battery on any one of their transmission
Like,
sites and
is
we can't
exempt
say
from all
anything
of
about
this.
it.
And just because something may be an opportunity site, you still can say no. You don't have to entertain it.
Well, at least it's better with the municipally owned.
It says may
Yeah,
elect to
public.
consider, so you may not elect, you may also not want to. But if, we want you to feel comfortable, we're not trying to put anything in here that somebody doesn't, it's just to try to capture these things that we've discussed at the
Yeah.
committee
Yeah.
task force, saying, what about this and how about that? It's like, those are case by case,
Yeah.
and we can't address them all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I would take you to E, the findings by the town board. You have five different findings that the town board can make. And additionally, as H points out, you approve of modifications or disapprove the landing. So this does leave this at the discretion of the town board, which was something that the steering committee was quite adamant on, that we need the town board to be able to weigh in on these projects at some point.
And also the town board gets peer review as well, so it's not just to figure things out on your own. You also get all the benefit of any kind of peer review that needs to happen.
Simultaneously?
during a process, if someone's engaged in requesting a zoning change to this renewable energy overlay and you want to assess what does that mean, we would then get an expert to
Okay.
come and do that review.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Furthermore, we did add a community benefit agreement and some of the language there about how the applicant needs to engage with a community group, CAC or the like. And that part of the town board's deliberation would concern how, what kind of funding or what kind of project or program you would like the developer to undertake to get the community engaged and in support of the energy storage facility. Something you could look into and make it a better fit for our town. So that would be
That's Article 7A.
Article 7A.
Then there's Article, 330, 162.21, and these are the special exception requirements for the, if you're in, so this, we had two separate sections, sort of tier 3 and tier 2, but we're thinking we're gonna take the tier 3 criteria and put them back with the town board. So that's just gonna be a little different and keep this just simply tier 2, 600 kilowatt hours up to a maximum of 5 megawatt only in existing industrial zones. So that's an application that could be made to the planning board.
Wait, are you doing Article 7 now?
Yeah.
The repeal and replace.
The repeal and replace. Randomly, they're both Article 7,
That is
and we
right.
didn't even mean it to happen.
7A and 7.
17. One is 7 and one is 17. I'm sorry. There's an X there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I was gonna say, like, how are you in 7 again? So it's 17. So this is all related to the review that goes on for tier 2 at the planning board level, right?
yes. So A
covers-
and B stipulate again, the delineation of tiers 2 and 3. I think we've covered
Which
that.
we're just gonna work on a little more, tighten that up for how
And-
that works.
Right, and then we move to the development standards, the general requirements. I'm just gonna kind of click through them. If you have any questions, please stop me along the way. So we have the height set at 15 feet. We have screening, and that would be front, side, and rear. Again, these are all at the discretion of the planning board, but they will also give guidance on the design and access. We did want to point out that the fire apparatus have to have the turning radius and have to be able to get around the site. And on top of that, that if you need to stage equipment during a fire incident, it needs to be accommodated on the site so as not to interfere with the free flow of traffic around that parcel. We did put a requirement for battery energy storage to be placed in cabinets or containers on top of a slab concrete foundation. Additionally, vegetation removal to 20 feet. We added some language about it being non-combustible or native as well.
Just meaning that you can't have any trees growing within 20 feet of a storage cabinet or any non-combustible material. Or any combustible. Like,
residential,
no, this is all
Well-
related to light industrial.
light industry, okay.
So those are some of and then we get into the adjoining street right away. We have a minimum transitional yard of 50 feet.
Well, wait, excuse me, when you say it's only applicable to the light industrial, do you mean that if we were to go with one of those zone changes, these wouldn't apply as well? Or
I
they would?
had it fitted in here that they would, but I think then you would just set all those in the
In the public
Zoning.
hearing.
at the zoning
Yeah.
level, and then they would come for site plan. So it'd be a little different. So it's not a redundant granting of a use.
Mhm.
Like this grant, a special exception is we use the words special exception in planning this term. But the truth is, it's just a conditional use permit. That is the other words that I'd rather call it. Because it sounds like you're making some special dispensation for someone when you're not. It's
Mhm.
just the way this planning term works out. Technically, what it is, and everywhere else in this country, it's called a conditional use permit. So who gives the conditional use? You, the town board, or the planning board, right, Jim? Like, does that make sense?
Yes.
It's just like who. So, in this case, for the tier 2, it's the planning board, that's clear. In the zoning, the way we set it up was you give a conceptual zoning allowance, you say, yeah, this overlay is allowed, and then they go to the special exception. But it's almost redundant, so we're just trying to pull that out, and in your deliberations, the tier 3 stuff. But the site plan things will all come into play. But you'll set all that in the zoning because it may be different. This is just simple, because it's industrial zone, they have a chart, the setbacks, everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just gonna tighten that up and fix that. The way we had it here, we realized could use a little work. Sorry.
That's all right. Moving on to point 8 on page 2, that's the aquifer protection. We are going to require retention ponds. These would be in order to gather the water during a fire suppression event. That water would be in an impermeable location that would be isolated from the stormwater drainage.
I know Brian
until
had
such-
mentioned that during the working group.
Yes.
But does that mean it's gonna be like a moat around it?
It would need to be, the town engineer, the stormwater management officer would have to be involved in how it's the proper design. I don't have the
Could be a
design.
tank around
It
it,
could be a tank. It doesn't
Could
have to
be a
be
tank.
necessarily
like a
a-
oil,
an
Right.
like, how they,
moat.
yeah, like,
I don't think they would want the water and the batteries like that. Like
No, I
think
mean
you would-
like underground, but I mean circle around the whole thing, cause if you're hosing down the area around it, isn't that where
I assume it would be drainage pipes that would seem to collect in one certain area,
so can we leave it so vague like this?
a little more vague?
No,
or
I mean,
leave
can
it?
we leave it the way it's vague?
I'll
Like
look into
if you
some
look
language
at
on
it,
it.
you don't know what you're supposed to do.
Well, they have to meet with, they would have to meet with, say, Tom and discuss what kind of.
So instead of
volume,
saying within
right?
an impermeable retention pond, you can just say gathered and retained on site.
Yeah,
And then
Oh,
that,
yeah, I like that.
That's better.
Then they'll have to show Tom, you're right.
Mhm.
yeah.
Sure, they can figure out how to best do that then.
And then is the required retention, and then just cross out pond,
Mhm.
shall require a severable storm drain. So whatever that retention ends up looking like.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be to minimize the contamination. If there was an incident and the water was contaminated, we're trying to protect the aquifer. So those waters would be retained, filtered, and then released into the environment in accordance with the DEC and the stormwater management plan, as well as, the state pollutant discharge and elimination permits. The next requirements are fencing. This is pretty straightforward. We did increase it to 10 feet in the industrial zone, and obviously we want to allow for access for first responders, for inspections, for certified fire mitigation personnel.
Look at C, it says shall and will, one of those should come up.
Yes, see, I see that. And yeah, so bollards are another way of protecting the battery energy storage from potential vehicle impact. Signage.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Another little tweak. The last line of F
Hmm.
in the, where it says that such time as, that word has to get added in there.
Thank you.
All right.
Signage, the signage should get progressively more elaborate as these facilities get larger. There have been, the interagency working group discussed some new visual techniques that I've tried to include here. Furthermore, they also recommended that this visual map be at the outermost extent of the property at, let's say, the access point, so that you don't actually have to go in to the surrounding storage facility if it's a fire incident is taking place.
That's a good idea.
Lighting, I'll just say that dark skies, our town code on that prevails and is listed here. Similarly, noise, town code applies in that regard as well. Back to drainage, we want to make
So
sure
the
that
noise is at usually 1 hour, you're saying here, that's what it is? I don't know.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my understanding. 60 dBA over an hour. Is
Mhm.
that? I'll have to look again.
No, you don't have to. I didn't know how long the noise went on with the battery storage.
Yes. Drainage, we were just trying to make sure that we understand where the water would go from the site so that we can act accordingly if there's mitigation or if there's some form of pollution in adjacent sites, we would know how that occurred. We also wanted to point out that these things weigh several thousands of pounds and that we would like to have our roads restored if they have been beaten up during transportation of these units.
Good.
Then we had some specifics on tier 2 and tier 3, but I think since we're kind of melding the overlay with the tier 2, or I should say separating the two, perhaps these will be moved along with that. But I can certainly elaborate each one if you'd like. Or
No, this is just submission requirements and also requiring all the things that LIFO or PSEG require. So we get a copy so people aren't having to foil them or try to get them from somewhere. We have all the documentation that they've presented to another agency to get an interconnection agreement. Or to do, PSEG requires studies about how this will interact with the grid or whatever, and we'll have all that information too. So.
Okay.
yeah, I would just add, interconnection is a very elaborate process. There's a lot of different entities that are involved, from the New York Independent System Operators, LIPA, PSEG, NYSERDA has been involved in incentivizing batteries, so they have procedures as well. What we're trying to do is get the information from where they are in those other processes, the information they've submitted. This can be at the preliminary stage. The point is it'll help to give us knowledge into what their uses are. It'll tell us about their equipment, what they proposed, if it's feasible or not. Maybe they need more different equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this will shed light on if there's going to be interconnections because the grid cannot manage or handle that capacity, that extra capacity. So maybe we're looking at a change in transmission or distribution lines, which would affect the surrounding areas as well. So by getting some of that information from those processes, I think we'll be better informed as to what the in totality of the battery energy storage project is all about. So we added those parts. There might be some issues on where they are in the process, again, with the ownership of the site. Are they allowed? Some of these things cost thousands of dollars, like a coordinated electrical system interconnection review. Those might be hard to ask for from an applicant who's still trying to figure out it. But we'll ask, and if they're in a certain stage, they can produce those documents or they can't. But we wanted to cover all the bases there. Again, for the peer review to kick in and assist us in those technicalities of those procedures and where the application stands and what would be next. The peer review is vital in that regard as well. So that would be point 2 is the peer review. Industry experts, again, NYSERDA has site specialists. They're going to be recommending individuals that can assist the town planning board and the town board. So that would culminate in a report that would have again compliance with a list of compliant equipment, demonstrate site suitability or the lack thereof, that they've looked into alternate sites and sites that are already being used as test facilities. Additionally, we would like them to look into air dispersion models. I'm on, D.4 at this point. So we would like some air dispersion modeling, in particular because of the smoke that could be generated from a deflagration thermal runaway event that is potential for hydrofluoric acid and the not so nice part of a fire from a BESS. Additionally, we'd like to look at the woodland health around the sites to determine the fire hazard associated with the surrounding we state again that the type 2 and the type 3, tier 1 and tier 3 would be type 1 secret action determination. Then we ask for a schematic, the general 1 to 3 line, part and parcel of any application. Then we have the preliminary equipment list. Can't reiterate enough that it has to be compliant with the codes and standards for equipment, UL, NFPA 855, or the like, depending on which piece of equipment. And that would be a preliminary list followed by a final list. So we would be able to see the difference in the equipment and actually approve the final equipment at the end of the project. We move on to a commissioning plan, a safety compliance plan, an operation and maintenance plan, and an emergency operation and response plan. I'd be happy to get into each one of these, but there's a lot of standard language in them, and there's also the additional language from the interagency working group, those recommendations. So that is where we've made some alterations. I can try to highlight some of the new additions. I think that might be helpful for the board. The safety compliance plan, that pretty much adds some inspection language, but not much. So that could be fleshed out a little bit more. But I did want to say that this, again, the working group has given us some guidance on alternate explosion control systems. There are other standards that should be looked at besides just NFPA 69 and 68. On to operations and maintenance, working group recommended a network operations center or a remote operations center. So we're talking about someone who has a visual, is connected to these sites 24/7. The sensors are being monitored. There's a battery management system in place, and there's actually somebody there manning the helm. These sites don't sit out there alone and unwatched. There's data being constantly gathered. There's closed circuit TVs that are monitoring the site for disturbance or signs of a problem. So I thought, well, the steering committee asked that those working group recommendations be added, and that this is where we took that opportunity.
Now, with respect to that, some of the facilities will have closed circuit TV and whatnot. How closely will they be working with the municipality? Is that to be determined, or is that, was that explored in the committee's work at all, or?
It has been discussed as part of a procedure where there is a plan in place for how the monitoring system, the NOC, the network, or the remote operator is to engage if the alarm is triggered. There is a procedure on who to contact, how they are. There's a list of fire mitigation personnel.
Right.
So there is a procedure that's discussed.
Okay.
That and they are to be able to be contacted as well. At any point, somebody feels like they see something going on site, that network, that remote operator is to be contacted, and we do spell out in the emergency operations plan within 15 minutes, they need to be available for dispatch.
Who's that?
Certified fire mitigation personnel.
Okay.
And then there's
Emergency
training in
responders.
here too for our first responders.
Could we include public safety to be a part of that?
They are.
Okay.
It's referencing the fire marshal, but it's many sections here reference the fire marshal's office.
Okay. Very good.
And we also have emergency, applicant in coordination with fire marshal and/or emergency management administrator.
Okay.
Will present an industry-funded analysis of the manpower and equipment needs for an emergency response. So that way we know up front, based on the size and whatever of this facility, what would be
What you need.
necessary. And then we get in later into the training and equipment.
I forgot to ask before. Does it say how, if it's supposed to be on ground level or it could be up?
Everything's only 1 story, 15 feet high.
Yeah.
Not double stacked.
It says that
Slab
in the
on grade.
beginning.
Slab on grade?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember it said slab, but then it said, I don't think it said on grade.
It did before. I may have fell off, but I'm pretty sure it
I'll
does
make
say
sure.
on
What
grade.
does that mean on?
That means that it can't be, you can't have a building in the cellar. You can't,
Oh.
it has to be,
Yeah,
Yeah.
on grade.
yeah, it has to, and the container should be, strapped down to the slab.
Oh, that's a good.
Yes. Has to be wind
Well, they can't get a permit unless they meet
Yeah.
the hurricane
Yeah.
standards.
Do we, but on that same, do we maybe not want these things? Like, in an enclosed, like,
No, you do, because that's how you monitor them, and they want them that
no,
way
no, no,
too.
no, not in a cabinet, but I'm saying, like, if you're saying, you're specifying that the slab has to be on grade, and they're willing to take that slab and drop it to do noise mitigation and also keep it even more contained in like a concrete box.
Like they do it at a tennis court. If you go to a
Yeah.
tennis court, you have to,
So you want it
Below.
to say on grade
I
or
wouldn't
not?
want to preclude somebody, I mean, it's gonna cost them more money to do that, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to stop them from doing that, cause that's maybe a way to keep it even quieter and more contained.
To do what?
To have it like Bill was saying, like a sunken tennis court where you have it below grade, but it's open to the or maybe it should say open air, or
Open
the
air.
cabinets need to be open to the air and not like
They do
I think
say that
I
20
would-
feet around it has to be.
yeah.
open.
I would say there's
Yeah.
so many standards on how these systems are placed,
Yeah.
that there might be standards from NFPA that have already established exactly where they need to be, what's
Around them.
around them, the thickness of the concrete, if it's
Yeah.
up on pilings or not. There's a lot.
Because then too, if you get into a sand mine and you're saying at grade, is it at the bottom of the sand mine? Is
Yeah.
it,
up high.
you know, like
Oh,
how?
yeah.
Because I mean, that was what was kind of the plus of a sand mine, was that it is below grade and it would
Is
quiet
it a-
things and keep it contained.
You're saying, is it accounting for topography?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should count, it should, that's a good point.
Like natural grade or existing grade, or I don't, you know.
Okay, so we're trying to keep it as a little bit open
I think
for
Yeah.
each
so.
for each
Yeah,
parcel.
but I think that you should be able to, they should be able to just sink them down, you know.
Okay,
So then we don't have to change it because it doesn't say on grade.
it doesn't
Yeah.
say on grade.
But is it clear you can't double to the height?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is part of standards and codes that that's not permitted.
Okay.
I mean, we could state it, and it really brings up a point. We have stated a lot here, but there are over 21 different national standards, be it the Electrotechnical Commission, Underwriters Laboratory, the NFPA. There are a lot of standards on these facilities that they must meet. So we have adopted all of those standards by reference. So if we didn't catch it, it's
It's there.
almost
Yeah.
certainly within those standards. So just going back to I think we were kind of put the two emergency operations and fire safety together, but we will have, there is a procedure for alerting the appropriate first responders and how and what is sent to the site. That will also be contingent on training for that equipment and that personnel. The fire marshal will establish the cadence, the regularity of those inspections, maintain a log, which will be kept on site as well. So we know that these facilities have been looked at. The people that are currently working with the fire department have been trained to address an event. So there's quite a bit on that emergency operations and response. You can see it's fleshed out with several points. Then we have decommissioning. I think it's the next one. Right? Or we're still at. I'm sorry. Commissioning would be the next one. So that's turning the unit on. That is something that should be have a technical expert on site. That way, that if there's any issues, they can properly address those issues and inform the town about anything that needs to be changed over. Am I skipping
No,
around too
No,
much?
that's good.
No.
No, I think
K
we
is-
did already
K is
decommission.
talking
We
it.
did
about-
commission?
Yeah, I think we were
Sorry,
already up to
I've lost my place.
decommission
We're on
I
I think
interrupted you.
ownership changes or decommissioning.
Oh,
on
okay,
page 11.
all right. Ownership changes, standard language there, but we did want to fold in that the community benefit agreement, that if the ownership changes, otherwise, most of the other are standard issue for site plan and ownership parameters. Then we go on to the decommissioning.
So there's procedures for turning it on,
Procedures.
and there's procedures for turning it off.
Mhm.
So that's decommissioning. And then there's a fund.
I
G.
really like that idea.
So it says that
Yes.
they were required to continuously maintain a fund that remained payable to the town of Southampton. Planning board will determine that, and you'll accept that as you do normally for its removal. And the fund annually adjusted for inflation and remain active for the period of the
That
life
way
of
they
the
can't
best
just walk
facility.
away.
Well, when you start something and then if you don't have it 20 years later, the cost has gone up exponentially
Yeah.
and we only hold a bond for a smaller amount. So we want to make sure, I guess, that works.
An annual reassessment, I might add, something that says every year this bond will be reassessed or
I think that,
adjusted.
I think you should just have it go up with the inflation,
Just with inflation.
because that way it's a lot easier for the
It's-
person.
Okay,
It does say that. It says said fund shall be annually adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
okay, excellent. That we have the exact same language on insurance indemnification and waiver here as well. And then we parsed out tier 2 having a separate set of requirements and tier 3 having a separate set.
Yeah, so this will fix, this is the part I was referring to earlier, that maybe we can fold in earlier in the law for tier 2, being that it's industrial, et cetera.
Yeah, it is a bit, some of it seems redundant, but having come from the Article 7A, some of it matches up with that. Otherwise, there's quite a bit of language on the, basically, if you're a tier 2, you're 600 to 5, you're gonna fall under a different set of interconnect procedures. So we wanna call those out. If you're a tier 3, you've got a whole nother set of interconnect
Right.
procedures. We wanna call those ones out. So we can say, you're in this area, please bring us this material. Let us know where you are with, in the interconnect procedure. So that's where I was trying to go with that section.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and then 12339, I bring it before you for your consideration. It is very similar to what we have on the books now. We just added the tiering, so
Is this a whole new section?
it's
No, we already
existing.
have 12339.3.
Because it's all underlined. That made me think it's all new.
Oops, that would
Yeah,
be-
we have to,
I had no idea that
we'll fix that. That could be we could just repeal and replace it. That's the easiest way.
You
But we
mentioned that
can
there were
make it-
edits and additions here. So
What we did, the biggest thing was add these, codes, all these NFPA codes here.
oh,
That was
excellent.
never there.
And
Oh,
this
that's good.
and this
Page. There's a whole page of codes that we added.
procedurally it prompts the planning review.
This is all about like a building inspector would look at this code, chapter 123.
Okay.
This gets down to the permitting level. Now, we have this here. We have this part. We'll check it out and make sure what we have or don't have, and if it's a lot of changes, then we should just repeal and replace it. It's just easier for people to read and long and understand it.
How big are the batteries themselves?
How big
Depending on the capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you a Tesla megapack, so when we're in the megawatt scale, we're looking at, they also often say an ISO container. That's a 40-foot by 10 by maybe 10, I believe. But a megapack would be like
Yeah.
25 feet long, 9 feet wide, and 6 feet high.
Okay.
So that's a 3 megawatt
Yeah.
container right there. You get into, in the kilowatts, 600, 700, you're looking at a filing cabinet, let's say, or a double
Or
O.
like a Tesla.
That's- Yeah, that's
Site
like
like a
for
wall.
home.
That's
Or a
12
business.
Yeah, business,
the
yeah.
power wall,
Yeah.
that's in the 12, 10 to 12
Because hopefully in the
range
future they get smaller.
kilowatt, and then
They will.
an electric vehicle is 100 kilowatt. So an electric vehicle, you can imagine, I don't know if you've seen the size of that battery, that's
It's a big
casket, right? I mean, something
Yeah.
along those
Yeah.
lines. That's horrible to say.
Okay.
Withdrawn.
Sorry, thank you. So that's what we have. Our plan
Lot of work.
was to put this in resolution form, so that it could go to your special meeting to schedule the public hearing.
Excellent.
That's where we're at.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Couldn't have done it without Seth.
Yeah.
Huge undertaking and
Yes.
It
So
was a
much
team
work.
effort, and I have to thank the Battery Energy Storage
Christine, it
Steering Committee.
Yes,
They were
exactly.
very helpful, and they vetted and we deliberated on all these items.
A lot of
We've
sleepless
had
nights.
a lot of help from Bill Overker and Gary Stevens.
it was a successful committee, I think.
Yeah,
I-
we
I
did
think
send
so
it
as
to the
well.
committee.
Hmm?
We sent this to the committee as well, just to, so
No,
that.
but I mean, in all seriousness, we were hiring an outside consultant for what, $60,000 to do this, and you know, it was, I know, a big undertaking for you guys work-wise, but I think that you know the public should feel better about the fact that this was all done, you know, organically. We went through with their concerns and we vetted all of their concerns. And Seth, I mean, you did a ton of research on this. I mean, I have a stack in my file. It's a lot.
He's got his binders filled
But yeah, I
with
mean, not only
stuff.
did you save the taxpayers a ton of money, but we did this the way that people wanted it done. So
Right, we kept it close,
Yes.
in-house, and
Did
did
a
it the
good
way
job.
we knew we needed it to be done.
And we're
So
open
thank
to
you.
criticism and want to elicit feedback.
But
So
what I've heard from people that have heard our meetings so forth, I haven't gotten any negative feedback on this at all. So
No.
what's
Everybody's
Well,
happy
that
about it.
continues.
The only complaint is, what's taking so long? But, you know, this is a lot of work.
Yes.
People have to be
Yeah.
patient.
and if we did it quickly, they'd say, "Why'd you rush?"
Yeah.
Again, when you do the law and it's in its form to
Yeah.
schedule a hearing, it will get formally referred to the planning commission. I'll go back. in
We'll
front
put
of
it
them
online
again.
so that people can get it.
Put
and
it
look
all
at
online when we have it in our final form. It'll be available. And
And the town attorneys have reviewed it.
town attorney,
Yeah.
yes, Christine's been very, very helpful. And then also the planning board will get a copy and they'll
Right.
be able to weigh in.
And the state commission hasn't even finalized their final recommendations either on this, you know.
Right, and so what we tried to do was keep it, the threshold low and keep it, you know, quote unquote, smaller scale, to start and see how the comfort level is just in that way. And, you know, always can go back and make it even better.
I saw some pretty good commentary news the other day. They had two different people, kind of experts in the field, so who were kind of talking about this issue and from different perspectives. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
it's an evolving space. There's
Yeah,
news every day.
Right.
I can say that there's more moratoria out there than there is code. So
Right.
Yeah.
we're ahead of the curve.
Good.
Yes, I think most of
Oh, yeah.
the other towns will be looking at our code now and saying, you know,
How'd you do it?
yeah, going on. We'll start our speaking tour after.
We'll start loaning or renting out.
Yeah, exactly.
Write a book. It's a book.
That's
Enjoy.
not what it would be on, but yes.
Thank you very much.
We'll be getting some
Sorry. Thank you so much.
requests for side work.
Seth, could you just wait 1 minute?
Of course.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to the supervisor town council member liaison
Right on time.
updates.
Look at that.
I know, we are really on time.
Wow.
Bill, do you have anything to
No.
mention today?
I don't either.
I don't either. All right then. Well, good meeting. Now it's time for me to move to go into executive session to discuss personnel, acquisitions, confidential legal advice, and litigation.
Second.
And then close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks.